Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Can, and thank you for being here. We're going to get this class going. I'm here with Lyngso, and this is our regular Wednesday talk, and we're going to be talking about sheet mulching today. And so let me go ahead and share my screen, and while I'm doing that, this class will be recorded and will be available via our website after today. So let me start the presentation. Share. Okay. Alrighty, can everyone see the screen there? Perfect. All right, so the title of the talk used to be Sheet Mulch Your Way to a Sustainable Garden, and I had to change that a bit because sustainability had kind of become a mainstream word. So it's really all about regenerative soil and regenerative agriculture and gardening. So really sheet mulch in a way is sort of a regenerative process. So that's the title change for my talk today. Let's get going. Here's one of my favorite books, and it's a quote from Carl Capek from The Gardener's Year. It's sort of an old book per se from 1931, and he says, "I find that a real gardener is not a man who cultivates flowers. He's the man who cultivates the soil. And he's a creature who digs himself into the earth and leaves the sight of what is on it to us, gaping good for nothings. He lives buried in the ground. He builds his monument in a heap of compost, and if he came into the Garden of Eden, he would sniff excitedly and say, 'Good Lord, what he missed.'" So that's sort of like a satire book that he wrote, and it's a fun read if anybody's interested. I highly recommend it. So let's go into the talk with a sort of a soil perspective. Because sheet mulching, I know most of you folks are here to learn the process of sheet mulching and why it's important. So we're going to really cover the background information of what is soil and the regenerative aspects of soil and why sheet mulching is really crucial. So everything that we do here at Lyngso is based on soil food web. So we're really building the soil up. And that's what the talk is really all about, building your soil, bringing in organic matter, and building that microbiology within your existing soil. And it all starts with the soil food web, where all the microbiology is working together for the benefit of the productivity in your soil. And of course, in turn, your plants are going to thrive. And the main thing between soil is soil texture versus structure. So texture, as we all know, is the way that the soil sort of feels, and most of our soil contains clay, sand, and loam. And in the Bay Area, a lot of us have a clay dominant soil, and possibly in the coast side, it's mostly sandy dominant soil. So that's sort of like that texture, and the structure is really what is holding all these particles, all these texture together. It's the microorganisms within these clay, sand, loam, and silt. All those particles are being held by the microbiology. So essentially what we're building is we are improving the texture of our soil while building the structure of our soil. And if you see the picture to the left here with the soil test, it's really sort of shows you the structure and the texture right next to each other. So the one on the left in the test tube there, the soil is being held really, really well by the soil structure, which are the microbes and the biology that's holding all the texture of the soil together. On the right side, however, since the lack of organisms within the soil, as soon as you put the soil in the water, it just sort of dissipates and becomes mineral content or whatever is within the soil. So it just sort of clearly shows the difference between a good soil structure. And all of us really should have that structure holding the soil together. And oftentimes this is a problem in urban areas, such as the area. And we're really going to learn how to really improve this. And the soil profile is really, if you think about taking a hike or walking in the forest, what you're going to see is this surface layer, which is the leaf litter that constantly gets dropped, and no one's mowing that leaves off. No one's really raking the leaves and exposing the actual soil layer. So therefore that leaf layer is getting decomposed on a constant basis and is feeding that top layer of humus. And it's creating this organic structure that's on the top surface there. And it's working together with the microbiology, whether it's fungal network or the bacteria. It's really breaking down all that carbon matter that's falling on top of the soil and is creating that organic surface. And of course, the subsoil and the parent materials are going to be mineral content, essentially, years of rock formation and mineral deposits and such. So what we're trying to recreate with sheet mulching is that nice organic layer up top. So we're really trying to mimic nature's way of creating this really rich, nutritious layer of soil. And right now, if we look at our conventional agricultural system, farmers are lucky to have about 1% of soil organic matter within their farms and agricultural areas. So an undisturbed soil, if all the components, whether it's mineral matter, the soil, and water, are all balanced, it should have about 5% organic matter. And with biodynamic agricultural, regenerative agriculture, you can really up that number to upwards of about 10, 15% organic matter, which is amazing. I mean, it's not needed to have a sustained production and yield, but in an overall outlook, organic matter really does the trick of growing our foods and that much better. And in compacted soil, really that organic matter is lacking. So most of it is mineral content and maybe some water and a little bit of air. And if you notice in the compacted soil structure, soil chart there to the right, there's not much air in there. It's because all that pore spaces has been voided and it's been compressing over the years. And in order to eliminate that, we really do need to sort of aerate the soil in terms of introducing organics that will do that trick for you. And this is topsoil formation, as I just said. It's just a cyclical cycle where leaf litter falls down and all the critters decompose and turn them into organic matter, and it just goes on and on. So within our current, well, this was a study done by World Resource Institute in the 1990s, I believe early 90s, and it still sort of remains true. And we have a huge issue of soil degradation around the globe. And if you look at North America, about 66% of our soils were degraded over time due to agricultural activities, and about 30% was because of overgrazing from cattle. So almost about 90-something% of our soils, because of the way that we farm, because of the way that we grow our livestock. And current study, this is the most recent study here, in North America, that still sort of remains true. About 52.1% is due to agricultural activities, and about 34.8% is due to overgrazing, not much. And there are other factors that play into this as well, since we're constantly having evolving technologies, and we are just constantly plowing the land and not really restoring that lost organic matter. So the key is to go back to the basics and input organic matter to have a regenerative structure there. And this is a current map of our very degraded soils around the globe. And as you can tell, in California, we have pretty much all degraded soil there. And it's usually fill, and we're trying to build up soil matter and refrain from using harsh chemicals and things that will deplete the soil very easily. And in the United States, if we grow a pound of food, we can estimate about 6 pounds of soil loss. That's every pound of food that we consume, 6 pounds of topsoil is lost. And in developing nations, that's about doubled. So every pound of food that we consume, 12 pounds of soil is being lost. And this is farmable organic topsoil matter that's being lost. And if we use biointensive agricultural and regenerative soil replenishing methods, we can easily produce about 20 pounds of that soil for every pound of food that's consumed. We are putting back about 20 pounds of soil back into our system. So it's really important to note that the way that we consume our food has a direct relation to the soil loss. And soil loss not only causes erosion hotspots around the world, but it also is very detrimental to the economy as far as food prices going up and the transportation costs and causing global climate change as well. So how is this all really related to sheet mulch? Well, the sheet mulching is really a practice of restoring soil. And as we know, a nation that destroys its soil, it destroys itself. And about 2% increase in the carbon content of all our planet soils could be offset by 100% of our all the greenhouse gas emissions that's going into the carbon into our atmosphere. What does that mean? It means that we can actually sequester carbon within our soils. And if you're interested in learning more about this, check out some of our other soil talks where it really dives deep into carbon sequestration as well. And a great documentary is called Kiss the Ground that just took off recently, and it's on Netflix for free. So check that documentary out as well. So I'm going to go into our California conditions. Every year that I do this talk, I sort of monitor our drought map in California. And from 2011 to 2014, I know in 2014 we had that severe drought that we were coming out of, and we had about 5 to 7 years of really bad drought. And you can see the map here where the aquifers have been depleted, and California was really suffering in terms of groundwater depletion. So every time I give the talk, I show the map of California as to how we're doing. And this is the map as of today. And this was recorded, the data compiled yesterday. So we're still not completely out of the drought. In fact, we're going back into the drought. And this year we've been really hit with all the wildfires. And if you see in the Northern California area, we're in extreme drought. And in the Bay Area, we're in severe drought as well. So it's an evolving aspect. So it's not a infinite resource. So we've got to really just monitor the way that we spend our water and preserve our soil as well. So again, this is like the entire map of the West. It's drought monitor map for the entire Western region here. And I'm just going to briefly show you folks the evolution of the groundwater depletion here. And this is the current map as of today. Most of the Western region is in extreme or severe or extreme drought. So why does this all matter, essentially, and why are we talking about this in sheet mulching? Well, sheet mulching really takes care of a couple different things. It's really like an old technique, a permaculture technique that's used to control not only weeds, but also to feed the soil and to get rid of any unwanted plants that are growing in there. And now it's been recently being used to get rid of lawns. And it's a very easy and lazy way, I like to call it. It's a very easy way, rather than rototilling the entire soil and hauling your existing dirt out of your place. We really want to preserve what's there. So it's an alternative to a conventional lawn removal, essentially, where you're digging up everything and then you're throwing it in and you're bringing in new soil. Whereas sheet mulching, you're building soil right where you are without digging up anything. And it's also an alternative to toxic chemicals that you sometimes spray to get rid of weeds and even your lawn. So, and WELO, the Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, now requires for all California landscape projects over 1,000 square feet to have at least an inch of organic matter in the form of compost and at about 3 inches of mulch. So if you're doing a landscape remodel that's larger than about 1,000 square feet, you're now required to replenish that area with organic matter and to preserve that organic matter and protect it with a layer of mulch. And sheet mulching really uses recycled contents, and it really reduces waste. And that's sort of the key here. It's not to generate any waste or not to take out what you have and haul it away elsewhere and then bringing in new soil. And also, you're getting organic, natural fertilization through sheet mulching. Believe it or not, you're restoring all that macronutrients and micronutrients, all while building the soil biology. And where can you sheet mulch? Well, you can pretty much sheet mulch anywhere. And you can sheet mulch to get rid of lawns, sheet mulch in eroded areas as a weed eradication and to control your weeds that are taken over in your lawn. You can sheet mulch in biotreatment areas, street planting strips, and pretty much even around existing and established landscapes. It's very simple to do, and there's not really a landscape area that you cannot sheet mulch. There's some areas that are trickier than others, where I'll cover that in a few, but you can pretty much sheet mulch anywhere. So why is it necessary? So why do we need to sheet mulch? As I said before, the decomposition of organic matter really adds the NPK and the life to the soil. So, and it not only improves the ability the soil to hold moisture, but it increases the soil organic content, and it aerates the existing soil and creates usable pore spaces within your existing soil. And it also increases the drainage by pretty much feeding the soil and all the microbiology creating those pore spaces. And the surface evaporation is minimized, meaning that you have less water evaporating from your soil by mulching. So you're preserving that organic content from eroding in the future. And you're also creating that healthy microbiology and bringing in that balanced soil and creating a healthy ecosystem. Okay, oh, my cursor here, okay. So what we usually do is we try to blow away all these leaves that fall, especially now in fall. All the leaves are falling down, and we like to blow them away and put them in our green bins. However, if you're able to, I do highly recommend collecting them instead of blowing them. Go ahead and collect them and save them and use them as mulch instead. That's a great resource, and you can sheet mulch with your existing leaf litter that falls onto your property. If you don't have an active compost pile going, you can just do a passive composting with the mulch instead. And especially for established trees like oaks and redwoods, you just want to leave the leaf litter as is. They like to just sort of decompose on their own. And in fact, I know oaks and pine needles and redwoods are hard to decompose, and as they're really, really hardy. So in that case, if you don't want them to be piled up and it becomes sort of a nuisance, what you can do is you can use them as pathway mulch as well. And when's the best time to sheet mulch? Really, fall is a perfect time to sheet mulch, especially after the first rains, and it's really ideal time to plant too, especially if you're planting natives. You can simultaneously plant as well as sheet mulch. So it really, you're preparing your soil now in the fall for spring plantings, and you're creating that optimal fertile conditions for your spring plants to thrive. So now would be a good time to start sheet mulching. So how do you do it? How is sheet mulching done? There are probably, dozens of ways to sheet mulch, and it's really a layer-based method. Regardless of what you use and how many inches you go and what materials and what layer order, it all just comes down to pretty much three things. Compost, carbon material, which is cardboard, newspaper, or sheet mulch paper, which is pretty much a thin cardboard paper, and then mulch. So just three things is all you need, just compost, cardboard, and mulch. And of course, you can have your gloves and water hose and trench digger if you need to dig borders and things like that. So it's a very basic concept. And you want to really plan ahead and prepare your current area. And there's still a lot of rebates going on for lawn to landscape rebates. So I do highly recommend checking out your local county or city for any rebates that are available. So for example, if you're transitioning your current lawn and you're wanting to put in a native landscape or a water conserving landscape like xeriscaping, I do highly recommend going through the rebate program. You can get up to, I believe, $4 a square foot back from your agency. And the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, BASCA, you can check out their website for their rebates as well. So there are a couple things before you get started. One is applying for your rebates first, and oftentimes there's a wait time for rebates. So if you applied, it may take about a week or two, especially now during COVID. It could take a little longer, so you just have to be patient because you cannot start work on it until an assessor comes out and approves your rebate. So be patient with that, and they do have to apply your or approve your planting list as well. If you have a current lawn or a lawn that's not doing so well, you want to just go ahead and mow everything and possibly hand weed any weeds that you had, want to knock down any long leaves and blades. And you can collect all the materials that you've just mowed or knocked down, you can put them in the same area. Right on top. You don't have to throw them away in the green bin or anything. And of course, if you need to plant simultaneously, obviously you need to dig up the areas where the plants are going to go. Hopefully you have a planting plan where you can lay out in your area and then go ahead and dig the holes for the new plants that are incoming. Even though there are weeds and grass growing, don't worry about that. Just go ahead and dig all that. And then you want to mark the areas where the large plants are going and do the same. And before you do anything, you also want to figure out your irrigation. So most of the natives probably don't need any irrigation that's on a timer or any fancy irrigation. But if you are planting ornamentals or trees that require a lot of water, then now is the time to prepare the area for irrigation, because irrigation is going to go under for most parts. There's also subsurface irrigation if you're using that, or drip irrigation, or determine if you're doing an overhead spray, which is not recommended anymore. But either way, determine where everything is going. So have a plan before you sheet mulch. And now is really the fun part. Once you've prepared the area and you've got approval from your rebate agency, and even if you're not going through a rebate, go ahead and prepare the area. And one thing I forgot to mention is if you are digging, I'm going to go back to this slide here, do call 811 before digging to find out if you have any water line or gas line running through. Let's see here. So let me go back. And running through your area. So then the actual process of sheet mulching is really simple. You want to first knock down everything that you have and add a layer of compost. I like to do about 1/2 inch of compost directly on top of the area that you're going to be sheet mulching. And then you're going to add a layer of cardboard on top of that. So you have your compost, and then you have your cardboard. And the cardboard's usually going to be really stiff. So you want to overlap the cardboard so that the native soil or the compost that you've just laid down doesn't show through. And you can also use water to make the cardboard pliable, because oftentimes it's really stiff. So I'm getting comments here. Is everyone seeing the slides okay? Is everyone seeing the slides? Okay. Okay, good. Okay, great. I'm gonna continue here. All right, thank you. Okay, so as I was saying, we'll do 1/2 inch of compost and then cardboard on top of the compost, and then go ahead and make the cardboard pliable by using water. So you can just hose down your cardboard and then add another 1/2 inch of compost on top of that. So you're pretty much sandwiching the cardboard between compost. So compost at the bottom, cardboard, compost on top. What this is really going to do is add that organic matter to your native soil and organic matter on top of the new cardboard that you've introduced to this area. And the microbiology within the cardboard is, well, it's not within the cardboard, microbiology, the microbes within the compost is really going to decompose the cardboard that much faster. So you want to layer that between the compost layers. And then on top, now this is really up to your discretion, how much mulch you put on. I like to put about 3 to 4 inches up top. I think that's a pretty good amount. You could go higher or lower depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So I would do probably 3 to 4 inches of wood chips or bark. And now the main difference between the wood chips and the bark is the chips are really the heart of the wood, and it's going to take longer to decompose. And then the bark is really the outside of the tree, so which will be decomposed much faster. So depending on your application, whether you want the mulch to last longer or whether you want your bark to decompose faster. Again, if you're prepping your area for planting for spring, you want something that you want to break down much quicker. I would go with something like a bark as opposed to the wood chips that'll take much longer to break down. And then make sure to plant before mulching. I missed that step there. So when you're doing your 1/2 inch compost, cardboard and 1/2 inch compost, and if you're simultaneously planting, what you want to do is in the cardboard layer, you want to mark a circle and then pretty much cut the cardboard out with the holes that are already in place for planting your plants. So go ahead and make sure that the holes are cut out so that you're not stuck with cardboard when you're actually going to plant at that moment. And you can just sort of do an X in the cardboard and fold the cardboard down into the holes. And if that makes sense, you don't have to throw the cardboard out or anything. You can just push it into the hole and then add a compost right on top and plant your plants, and then you can mulch on top. And when you're planting simultaneously, just be sure not to bury the new planting with the mulch. So the flare of the trunk or the new plant really shouldn't be suffocating with the mulch. So you kind of want to spread it out a bit so it has some breathing room. And Stop Waste is a nonprofit agency in the East Bay that used to do a lot of sheet mulching, and this is an example of one of their sheet mulch party there. And as you can see on the left-hand side, the cardboard is sort of damp and it's being overlapped. Is someone talking here? Okay. All right, so I'm going to keep going. So you want to overlap the cardboard on top of each other and make sure that there's no native soil or the compost showing through. The reason you want to do this is you want to not give any dormant weed seeds an opportunity to grow through from your existing soil. And then on the bottom left-hand picture, you see that trench being made to the right of the brick. And it's really to make sure that the mulch and the new material that folks are bringing in doesn't spill over onto the hardscape area. So if you're having to balance that, you want to make a trench. That way when you're putting in and raising the entire grade by about 3 to 4 inches, it's going to be flush with your hardscape and not just spill over. And another trick is it's fine if it's a little bit mounding. You just want to gradually put all the mulch and compost material and mound it up into the middle, assuming the hardscape is not in the middle area as well. And then that way it's not going to affect the hardscape there. So here's an example of berms. So you could also use berms, and if you're doing pathways through your existing landscape and you want to sheet mulch simultaneously, you could do that as well. Instead of digging a trench, you can do decorative wall rocks and borders and get really creative with it. And if you see on the left side picture, they dug up some of the soil that they've used to dig that trench where the wall rock goes, and they've mounded that soil in the middle of the landscape. And often you'll see this in native landscapes where you can create mounds and plant plants right on top of the mound to create sort of a visual interest. And plus, lots of natives do like that mounding, gives them a chance for the roots to establish and also the water to drain away very fast, because a lot of the natives do not like standing water or really moist soil. So this really does help. And I think it creates a really cool effect in a landscape as well. Plus you have more planting surface to incorporate more plants. The right side is a landscape where they're putting in a pathway. In this case, they've dug up that path. They probably laid the base rock and then the sand, and they're putting in flagstone of some kind. And then they're creating a mound to the right side, and they're just using the soil within the site that is being excavated. And this is sort of really the idea behind sheet mulching, is keeping whatever is on site within that site without throwing anything away and creating less waste. So, and there's that mound again. So this was before the sheet mulch. They want to get rid of their lawn, and they're gonna mow it really, really close to the whatever the lowest setting is on the lawnmower and mow it down so low, and then you can use the same clippings and toss it into the mound area that they're creating there. And that's that pathway that we saw earlier. Now this garden decided not to use sort of a barrier between their pathway and the mulch. Often it will create some spillover. I do recommend using like a bender board or like metal edging, or even, brick to edge and define your pathway. But if you want that more organic look, you could decide not to do that as well, and you can just put some flagstone or stepping stone right there without any borders. But if you do decide to use gravel for that walkway, and then you're mulching to the left and the right side of it, over time they will sort of blend because of the wind and depending on how you use it, or if you have pets and children, that will all sort of blend over time. So just sort of choose your materials and create a plan before you move forward with that design implementation there. And then this is the same landscape after the plants have been established. So if you see, this was the start, during, right after, and then about, I believe maybe about a year later. And here's the bender board that I was talking about. They've decided to use mulch for the walkway as well, separated by a different kind of mulch used for their sheet mulching area. So it kind of has a distinction between areas to be walked on and areas that are not to be walked on. So you could do that as well. And of course, my favorite is always to use mulch for pathways. But if you want a more modern look or more long-lasting and solid hardscape, you could do that as well. And this was the earlier landscape in the front yard with the berm. As you can tell, they did the wall rock around the border, and it really is holding that 3 to 4 inches of mulch that they brought in. And I think it almost in this case the grade was raised about 6 inches. You can tell the difference between their flagstone walkway in the middle and the height of the actual mulched area. And you'll notice over time, even if you raise that grade with mulch, everything will just sort of settle over time, and it won't always remain that 6 inches. Maybe it'll be about 3-4 inches after about a year, and you've watered it and everything just sort of settles in. And that's typical. That's actually very normal, and it does happen. It's not because everything is compacting, it's because everything is working and decomposing as it's supposed to do. And, once a year or once every few years, depending on the exposure on your property, you should be able to mulch again, or actually you should mulch again. You shouldn't see any soil exposed. And if that's the case, it just means that it's getting decomposed quite rapidly, maybe due to a lot of moisture or exposure or not enough mulch in that particular area there. And then here are the resources for Save Our Water rebates. And I've listed pretty much most of the Bay Area agencies that may offer rebates to do your lawn to landscape. I would just check them, and these are all active links as well, and you can just see if you qualify, if your landscape qualifies, and you can apply for them. And pretty much if you build up the soil with organic materials, the plants will do just fine. And that's sort of my ending slide there, but I'm gonna open it up to any questions and any technical questions you folks have. You could either unmute and ask, or I will go to the chat and then figure out what questions are going on here.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm planting a plant, but I'm not changing my landscape. should I do the compost, cardboard compost, wood chips? It's a tree, it's a pomegranate tree, small one. Is that the way I should be sheet mulching, even around the area of that tree?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
if your goal is to get rid of the weeds or whatever it is, or if your goal is to replenish the soil, you can in fact sheet mulch simultaneously with existing plants. In your case, the pomegranate tree, you can sheet mulch around it. Just make sure not to pile up the mulch against the existing trees and the bushes, but it should be fine. And if you don't have a weed issue, and if you're just trying to replenish your soil, you could even not do cardboard. You can just do compost and a good amount of mulch.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Welcome.
I had a question.
Yes.
So I am actually removing all the grass. I'm doing a turf replacement, and I was planning to do sheet mulch, and I went online and I looked at a couple of videos, and one person said that if I use cardboard to sheet mulch, then he got snails underneath the cardboard. Will I have that problem if I use cardboard?
I have never heard of snails underneath the cardboard. I'm not sure how it was done. I mean, you're going to find critters regardless. So one of the aspects of sheet mulching is letting them be. If you have good ecological garden, you should have a little bit of snail here and there, maybe ants and some pests that birds like to eat and things like that. But I've never heard of a snail infestation or anything like that, especially under a cardboard, because the reason you're doing sheet mulching is to sort of get rid of whatever's underneath, like weeds or lawn. So you're really kind of suffocating that out. So I'm surprised that snails live under that condition because they want to be outside. So I'm not too sure.
So, I mean, I was just like, I'm going to do a big lawn, which is 5,000 square feet, and cover it with cardboard, and then not end up with having to deal with so many snails. I mean, is there something I can do to prevent, like, that from happening?
That I think you would probably have to look into that. The one advice that I will give you is make sure the compost is in contact with your native soil, and then cardboard, and then compost again. So the cardboard is really sandwiched between two layers of compost. And you're keeping the entire area sort of damp and moist throughout the sheet mulching process. And I mean, it really depends on your exposure to sun and the weather and the water, the time it takes to decompose that cardboard, because the cardboard, when you dig in come spring, really shouldn't be there, and all you're supposed to be left with is just organic matter.
And will weeds grow in it?
Oh, well, so weeds, they grow one of two ways. One, either you have existing weeds on your existing native area that you're sheet mulching, then in that case you may have some dormant weed seeds within the soil. Oftentimes, if you are landscaping and you're trying to rototill and you're disturbing that soil and you're bringing in good organic matter and you're putting that on top or amending your native soil, you'll see weed seeds pop up, and you'll have a whole bunch of weeds that you've never had before, because over time all those seeds are sort of dormant within, and they'll start popping up. And the other way is weed seeds are also airborne as well. So if your neighbors have a whole bunch of weeds and they let them go to seed and they come around and they lodge themselves on top of your sheet mulching area, pretty much, yeah, they're going to grow even on top of the sheet mulching area. And of course, it's going to be an optimal condition for them. One thing to know is the weeds are going to be super easy to pull out on top of your sheet mulch area because it'll be nice and aerated and it'll be very fluffy. So you shouldn't have any weeds with really, really established roots. And sheet mulching really helps pull out the weeds with ease. You can just pluck them right out and it's not going to be a bother. And an active weed maintenance is really needed to have that area be weed free. And the other thing to note is outcompete your weeds, outcompete them. Put some wildflower seeds, native wildflowers, or really plant your area with the plants that you want, and they will outcompete the weeds. So you shouldn't, if you have a good planting plan, you should implement that on every square foot of your garden, really, and let them just sort of thrive. And you're going to have some weeds here and there, especially, the trenches area where the hardscape meets the softscape area. You'll see oftentimes weeds or old grass starting to sprout right there because they haven't been sort of sheet mulched thoroughly. In that case, you can just go ahead and pluck them out or use an edger to get rid of them. But you'll see the soil over time, your native soil, your in the Bay Area, the clay dominant soil most likely will be a lot better over time. You sheet mulch.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Okay. So question, I'm going to start taking some questions from the chat here. Let's see. Will the recording be available? Yes. So recording is available on our website under community resources and recorded classes. And I'm going to post this hopefully today, if not tomorrow. I know tomorrow's Thanksgiving, but I'll try to do my best to post this by tomorrow or Friday at the very latest. Someone asked store-bought compost. Yeah, so you could use your own compost. Most people, if they are sheet mulching an area, they don't have enough compost to use for the sheet mulching area. So I recommend save your compost that you're making at home for your vegetable gardens or fruit trees, and just get like the green waste compost or your municipal compost, or plug for Lyngso or compost from Lyngso. So the amount of compost that you would need, I'm not sure if a typical home compost would be sufficient, because technically, a cubic yard of compost will cover about 200 square feet, and you need about an inch depth. So if you're making a cubic yard of compost and you've been saving that up, that'll give you 200 square feet coverage. And just a easy calculation there. So, but yeah, I would say save your homemade compost for your vegetables and fruit trees and things. And how thick should the cardboard layer be? Really, just one layer is good enough. If you're using newspaper or, like Trader Joe's bags or Whole Foods bags or something, maybe a couple layers of that. You could also collect cardboard from your local stores like Costco and things. Just make sure that you're peeling off all the plastic tape and things on there, and not putting that into your landscape, because that will not decompose. And you want to get cardboard with less ink on it, meaning not plastic filmed ink that's been printed on there. So just regular cardboard with like black writing is fine. Decompose, fine. How does this adapt to vegetable gardens, raised beds? I haven't sheet mulched in a raised beds and vegetable gardens just because I'm constantly working on my raised beds and vegetable gardens. But what I do make sure to do is add compost and mulch always. So my gardens are always covered with compost and mulch twice a year, like fall and spring. You can sheet mulch into it. Actually, I don't think it's necessary to sheet mulch your vegetable garden. Just use compost and mulch, because every season you're working on it. And I'm not sure it's really needed unless you haven't touched your vegetable garden or raised bed in a long time and it's full of weeds. In that case, it might be a good idea to sheet mulch. And also, it's a good idea now that we're in fall, to do some cover crops. If you're not going to be doing winter vegetables, just put in cover crops and don't let the beds sit fallow for a season. Okay, so what was the rebate website again? Oh, there it is. Somebody already gave that. Okay. For paths, do you still add compost? That's a very good question. I don't for paths, because they're just going to be forever sort of compacted. I don't add compost to the areas that will be marked. And the reason for that is, well, unless you're putting mulch on top, I suppose you could add compost underneath, but you're not going to be growing anything under. So it's really up to your discretion at that point. For hardscape pathways, if you're using flagstone or brick or something like that, I don't recommend compost, because it's not necessary. You're going to be putting in base rock or some concrete sand or something underneath. So not needed there. So if sheet mulching over an area that has very compacted soil, would it be better to add more compost underneath the cardboard? Yeah, absolutely. You can most definitely add, I mean, the 1/2 inch of compost underneath and 1/2 inch on top. It's sort of an estimate. I've seen people do 1 inch of compost underneath and 1 inch of compost on top. Totally fine. If you have really, really hard compacted soil that's void of any organic matter, that's perfectly fine to add a little bit more. Can we use leftover Amazon shipping boxes? Yes, you may. With the shipping labels, I tend to peel off my shipping labels, even though they are decomposable. It takes a little bit longer to decompose. And if I'm going to be wanting to have a sheet mulch that's sort of efficient and break down, I don't want any sort of a label that's going to hinder that process. So I would just rip off the shipping labels. And there are a couple different shipping labels with Amazon too. One that decomposes really, really fast and one that doesn't. Just make sure it's the one that does decompose and it doesn't have that plastic film on top. Anyone have problems with oxalis and how to control? Okay, so oxalis is, it's pretty hard to control, even with sheet mulching. There are a lot of rhizomes running through, and they're, oxalis bindweed. They're just sort of is one of those things that are really hard to mitigate and control. That doesn't mean it cannot be done. It's just not going to be done over one season. It may take a little bit more effort. It may take about 1 year or 2 years to really just get rid of the bindweeds and oxalis. And you can just really suffocate them out and outcompete them again. The key here is if you grow plants that are going to thrive in this new sheet mulch environment, say the natives or cover crops or whatever other crops, you really shouldn't have weeds taking over. Thickness of the cardboard, please. So it's just 1 layer of the cardboard. Like I said, just 1 layer is fine. Obviously the areas where you're going to be overlapping the cardboard, it'll have two thickness layer, but they will all decompose eventually. So does Lyngso deliver? Yeah, we can deliver to Milpitas. I've been flattening cardboard boxes and putting them on Creeping Charlie coming from the neighbors, but putting compost under and top is a good idea. Okay. Okay. If there's a noticeable dip in the yard due to a tree taken out a number of years ago when the root was rotten enough to pull out, it left a big dip, and we haven't done anything to the landscape since. How should we deal with the dip in the ground and when sheet mulching? Okay, good question. A couple things you could do. I'm not sure if you're planting simultaneously, or if you want to just sort of have the landscape be consistently graded. In that case, what I would do is go ahead and get some sandy loam. Some people call it topsoil. You can put in some sandy loam or even landscape mix, which has sandy loam and compost, and you can fill that dip and then sheet mulch right on top. You're just adding some soil in there, so you're just filling in the dip. But if you are planting in that old tree area, then, you know, plant around it, plant some shrubs or something, and you could sheet mulch around. So I have compacted soil with surface roots of trees and shrubs. We'll sheet mulching right on top of the roots, improve the soil conditions. Okay, so again, the same thing is you really don't want to kind of sheet mulch if you don't want to sheet mulch around established tree roots that are sort of popping up already and are shrubs and bushes that have tree roots that are sort of you know, popping out, because the reason that they're sort of coming up is they're coming up for air and water because you know, we've noticed in the past the 7-year drought that we had in California, a lot of the trees were doing that, and their roots and everything were coming up above the ground because the groundwater has been depleted and they're not getting any water. You can just sort of add a little bit of compost and mulch, but you really don't want to suffocate more because they'll just keep on doing that same thing where they're just protruding outwards or upwards. So just be careful when you're sheet mulching around existing landscape. What do you recommend for mulch for a vegetable garden? Okay, so vegetable garden mulch, I really like bark-based mulch for my vegetable beds just because I like to turn my garden, work on my garden every season. So in turn, the bark breaks down quite efficiently and fast. So the mini mulch, Douglas fir bark is my favorite one to use for vegetable gardens because it's small enough where it can be a soil amendment and it looks really great as well. But you could pretty much use a larger size, so it takes longer to break down. But I like the rapidness of it breaking down faster. So I use the smaller mulch, and I also add compost as well. And how many inches deep is the compost below the cardboard, and how many inches? I've covered this. It's just really up to your discretion. About 1/2 inch of compost underneath to about 1 inch. So it's really up to you, about 1/2 inch to about 1 inch, top and bottom. And I think those are all the questions there. I believe I addressed everyone's questions here. Does anyone else have any more questions that they want to jump? And okay, all right. Well, thank you everybody for attending the sheet mulch talk today. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and email you folks a copy of the presentation with the resources, and the recorded presentation will be available on our website as well. And I'll send the link out to that. So thank you again for attending, and take care, and happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Bye-bye.